A very good afternoon to you. Today is the 17th of April, 2024, and you are watching and listening to In Focus with Silvana Pavlovska, broadcasting from Melbourne, Australia. We are continuing our series on the Macedonian question, and in particular, the PRESPA agreement as a cultural genocide of the Macedonian national identity towards the termination of an illegal treaty, a scholarly publication by Professor Igor Janev, an eminent professor expert in international law. We are going to continue from where we left off last time, and last time it was chapter 5. And we did the first part of chapter 5. There will be 3 parts, so today is the second part. In September 2022, finally, VMRO-DPMNE leader Christian Mickovski submitted an initiative for the referendum to the state election, to the State Election Commission, or SEC. The daily newspaper Republika reported that, and we quote, Mickovski expects 100 signatures to be collected today in the regional offices of the SEC so that it can be delivered to the parliament after the national holiday. He, as he said, will be among the first signatories in the regional office of the SEC in the suburb of Karposh, as well as MPs from VMRO-DPMNE and the coalition. End of quote. A question for the referendum delivered to the State Election Commission was formulated as follows, quote, are you in favor of terminating the validity of the law on ratification of the Treaty of Friendship, Good Neighborliness and Cooperation of the Republic of Macedonia and the Republic of Bulgaria, published in the Official Gazette of the Republic of Macedonia, number 12/2018 of the 18th of January 2018. End of quote. With respect to this formulation of the question that was shaped and constructed by VMRO's team, Mickovski gave some general explanatory remark addressed to the citizens of Macedonia, saying that, quote, if the referendum takes place, end of quote, then, quote again, the citizens will have the opportunity to say in favor for, and thus this agreement with Bulgaria ceases to be valid, or say be against that, so this agreement with the Republic of Bulgaria remains valid, end of quote. Essentially, what Mickovski wanted to say in that termination of the law on ratification of the treaty would be a first step toward the nullification of the treaty. As we may notice here, and that is that given the interpretation by Mickovski that it was entirely accurate, was not entirely accurate, since in order to cease to be a valid act, a treaty needs to be terminated. A referendum per se obviously could not automatically nullify a treaty. In addition, the formulated question for a referendum was constructed in an unusual and odd manner, as termination of the law on ratification of the treaty, and not the treaty as such through a diplomatic note for termination. Indeed, it appears that such nullification of the treaty is an option taking into consideration judicial precedent provided by the Macedonian Constitutional Court in the case of nullification of OCTA agreement with Greece, 2002, where the court, in absence of jurisdiction with respect to international treaties, actually nullified the law on ratification of that treaty and thus indirectly suspended or nullified a treaty per se. Nevertheless, this particular methodology of domestic nullification of a treaty appears to be very odd, since at the end of the story, with judicial nullification of the treaty, the Macedonian government still has to inform the other contracting party, that is Bulgaria, that the treaty was or has been nullified and not in force. This statement, information sent in the form of a diplomatic note to Bulgaria, is legally equivalent to the direct statement declaration or a diplomatic note for termination provided by Article 13 of the Treaty of Friendship, Good Neighborliness and Cooperation of the Republic of Macedonia and the Republic of Bulgaria. In Article 13, paragraph 3 of the Treaty of Friendship, Good Neighborliness and Cooperation of the Republic of Macedonia and the Republic of Bulgaria, it was provided how to terminate contracting obligations and rights. Quotation: each contracting party may terminate the treaty by giving written notice to the other contracting party. The treaty will cease to be in force 1 year after the date of receipt of this notice. Moving on to the next page, page 220. Therefore, in our view, it was, just one moment, please. Forgot to mention that it was end of quote. So I might read that again, actually. So here we have in Article 13, paragraph 3 of the Treaty of Friendship, Good Neighborliness and Cooperation of the Republic of Macedonia and the Republic of Bulgaria, there was provision on how to terminate the contracting obligations and rights. And we quote, each contracting party may terminate the treaty by giving written notice to the other contracting party. The treaty will cease to be in force 1 year after the date of receipt of this notice. End of quote. Therefore, in our view, it was entirely unnecessary for Vrlo to make the choice or the decision for referendum question that could potentially reopen the theoretical questions or potential dilemmas with respect to the relation between international law and domestic law. Instead, in my opinion, says Professor Igor Janev, a question that needed to be put before the citizens should have been placed in the following clear and direct form of, are you in favor of terminating the Treaty of Friendship, Good Neighborliness and Cooperation of the Republic of Macedonia and the Republic of Bulgaria, published in the official Gazette number 12/2018 of the 18th of January 2018? Question mark. As I have pointed out in my public remarks, says Professor Igor Janev, the Macedonians already made a binding decision on the referendum held in 1991 for an independent and sovereign Republic of Macedonia, and therefore a new referendum was not necessary for that same matter again. Additional arguments for direct and clear approach with respect to the question for plebiscite I presented in another article published in the daily Nova Macedonia under the title, International Agreements Creates Legal Obligations, both for the fulfillment and for their termination, end of quote. As I discovered later, says Professor Igor Janev, the main motivation for Vrlo with respect to the initiative for a referendum was in fact to advance a process leading toward the early and/or extraordinary elections. Christian Mickoski, among other declarations or announcements, gave the following statement, quote, the fact that we are starting a procedure for calling a mandatory referendum on the BAD, B-A-D, agreement with Bulgaria does not mean that we are giving up the request for early elections. On the contrary, it is an excellent opportunity to organize elections with the referendum at one cost. End of quote. As I predicted, says Professor Igor Janev, As I predicted in my analysis regarding the destiny of the plebiscite, the president of the Macedonian parliament, Jaferi, from the DUI, that is the ultra-nationalist Albanian party in Macedonia, have rejected and dismissed the initiative for referendum on legal grounds. Legal grounds, words are in quotation. He offered an odd quasi-legal argument that the initiative was against the constitution, apparently unaware of the above-mentioned constitutional court precedent, and thus blocked an initiative with the following, and in quotation, explanation. Start of quotation. The citizens' initiative is not a matter for which a referendum could be organized nationwide. The international treaties ratified in accordance with the Constitution are part of the national legal order and cannot be changed by law. End of quote. In addition, Jaferi revoked that initiative to hold a referendum on a treaty would allegedly be, quote, a breach of the Article 118 of the Constitution of the Republic of North Macedonia. End of quote. Just a reminder that this or Talat Jaferi is of Albanian background. He's not of Macedonian background, ethnically or otherwise, and he certainly proclaims himself as an Albanian. However, he lives in Macedonia and he happens to be in the echelons of power, something one reasonable person would question. How come? What happened there? That's another story. That apparently incompetent interpretation given by the president of the parliament, that's that Talat Jaferi, revoking Article 118 of the Constitution was or is apparently a wrongful one. It is provided in Article 118 of the Constitution that, quotation, the international agreements ratified in accordance with the Constitution are part of the international legal order. I beg your pardon. They are part of the internal legal order and cannot be changed by law. End of quote. However, after the already mentioned Octa case, it appears that the judicial precedent covering nullification of the Octa agreement, that is the law of ratification that is in domestic jurisdiction, could apply here as well in the case of the treaty with Bulgaria. Therefore, the Macedonian political opposition rightfully objected, that is the VMRO-DPMNE party, rightfully objected to the dubious and biased, in quotes, legal interpretation, end of quote, of the matter. And they also pointed out to the limited powers of a speaker of the parliament, that's that Jaferi man, of the constitution. It appears that despite the stipulation that treaties, quote, are part of the internal legal order, end of quote, they still could be subject of termination or nullification, particularly if such act conflicts with the norm or of jus cogens or and are not implementable in practice. So here we end today's part of chapter 5.2. We shall continue with the final part of chapter 2, part 5, very shortly, so please stay tuned. We are endeavoring to keep the segments shorter so that you may follow them, because as you know, these are legal, this is a legal document. It relates to international law. It relates to the injustice that has been done to the Macedonian people and the Macedonian country or state as a whole as a result of certain decisions being made in the United Nations and Greece and Bulgaria. So here, with this paper, this scholarly publication, which has been researched thoroughly and with the prior knowledge and expertise, is giving us the facts of the matter. What we are interested in focus with Silvana Pavlovska is facts, and that's what we are able to present to you, thanks to Professor Dr. Igor Janev, I should say. So stay tuned, and I will see you very shortly. You've been listening to In Focus with Silvana Pavlovska, broadcasting from Melbourne, Australia. Talk to you shortly.